Hi, hello, and welcome to Rebel Unicorn Crafts. Today I'm going to be swatching and kind of testing out and sharing my first impressions of the Koi watercolor set. I bought this on Amazon. It's a set of 18 tubes, and it was around $23 or $24 for these tubes. Now, I was pretty excited about this set because I've been looking for a nice kind of mid to beginner range set to recommend to people. And while I do really generally like the shin hand ones, I think they're great. I wanted to have an alternative because I know not everybody can get these, and these ones are a little more widely available from a few different places. So I bought these and waited for them to come in and wanted to get to swatching, which is what I did. Now, when I swatch colors, I do a 4-grid pattern, where in the first one, I try to load up as much pigment to see the total value of the color. The second one, I create kind of a little gradient so I can see how it thins out. The third, I again saturate that color, but then I try to lift out of it. And I also drop some water in because I want to see what kind of blooming effects it's going to give. And the final one is a wet on wet. So I take the wet portion of it and drop some of that color in. Now that we've talked about the actual way I'll be swatching, let's just go ahead and speed this up. And I'm not going to make this so that you have to watch the whole thing at real time, because this did take me about an hour to swatch all of these. They started off fairly strong. I think in general, my shin hand colors in the yellow ranges are better than this, but I did like these to start with. They were pretty good initially. I even really liked this pale orangish color. I think it would be really pretty for making flowers with. But my first impressions already are that these colors are all a little milkier, and you can definitely see that in the pale orange one. There's quite a bit of that white gouache in there, and I think that's a little bit to be expected with that color specifically, but I did see this throughout all of the colors. Now, everybody has different preferences in their watercolor, and I personally don't like when they're a little bit milky like this. I like when they're a little bit more transparent or just pigment, but if they're a little milkier, they will cover a little bit more. So if that's your thing, then these definitely lean more towards a milky watercolor. Up until this point, I wasn't blown away by these colors, but I was pretty satisfied until this yellow ochre color. It had so much of the binder separating from it that you can see here, it just kind of smears around on the page, and I did try to dump it out. I had to dump out so much of that pigment in order to actually get to the actual color that was separated from the binder. And even then, it was still so separated and gloopy. The color itself was kind of pretty, but using it, I mean, I feel like I'd had to dump out a fourth or a third of that tube in order to actually get down to the actual paint. And since it was so separated, it had changed the whole chemistry of it. I did have to take a little detour back to that pale orange color because I forgot to actually test the lifting and blooming effects of it. But, you know, I had waited for the other thing too long and it had dried. So I went ahead and went back to that before moving on to more of the browns. And this burnt sienna color had a little bit of the separation, but not so much that it seemed to interfere with the actual colors. This was a pretty nice color, but it was, you know, a little milkier than I would have wanted. And unfortunately, at this point, when I got into the Van Dyke Brown, I started to realize that the issue with separation, similar to the yellow ochre, wasn't a one-off, because with this Van Dyke Brown, I had to literally pour the binder out of it in order to get to the actual paint and pigment. And I'd only tested 6 colors so far, and so 2 out of those 6 were in such bad shape I had to remove a ton of the paint from the tube in order to actually get any of the paint. And unfortunately, these were not the only 2 that this happened to. This continued to happen again and again, and you can see my paint palette starts to fill up with the separated goop of the binder from the actual paint on so many of these colors. So, yeah, that's not looking good for me. I do want to tell you and show you all the ones that this was not great on, but there were a couple colors that I do want to commend, because there were a few that if this set had come all pre-mixed, I probably would have made this a good suggested buy, because a couple of these blues were phenomenal. At this point in my testing, I had pretty low expectations from the set, because by the time I got to the blues, I'd had so many milky colors and separating colors that I had just lost all hope in them, but I was continuing on until I got to the two blues. Ultramarine and Prussian blue were gorgeous. They were absolutely stunning, and they might have been good enough to make this a recommended kind of beginner type set, but ultimately, I, in good conscience, cannot recommend these, because I feel like half of these colors almost were ruined by that separation. Now, this could be a one-off batch issue, so if you have some koi colors that have not separated and are in good condition and you really like them, I think that these could be good workable paints, but for $23 you can get other things that are going to be in better shape and I think have better pigmentation than these ones. So let's get into my actual evaluation of these. As far as price, I'm going to give these 5 out of 10 Moogies for their price and value. If these had been in better shape, they would have been right about what I expected. They're not super cheap ones, but they're not super expensive, and I think their quality is maybe a little bit other than the separation one, because obviously I feel like that is inexcusable. But the actual pigmentation, the quality is around, I would give it around that price range, about that. I'm going to give it a 5. The actual quality of it, though, I'm giving it a 1. That was, I feel like, way too inexcusable to have that many. If it were just on one color, sure. But I ordered these and I tested them within a few weeks of actually having them in my possession, so it's not like these sat on the shelf where I had control over them for a really long time. They're going to get their highest score from me of 7 Moogies for accessibility, because you can actually buy these from a ton of different art supply stores, so if you were out looking for them, you wouldn't have a hard time finding these. The uniqueness or wow factor, I wanted to give these not much of anything, but the blues did bring a little something special. I have not seen an ultramarine in a set that I have liked as much as this one, so they get a few points for kind of uniqueness or wow factor. And then the usability, again, this all comes down to that separation. These would be super easy to use if they didn't have that separation, but it added in this whole other layer of making it difficult to actually use it, because you had to pour and separate and clean up. Ew, I didn't know. Now, for the set that I got, I'm going to rate these a 3.8 out of 10 Moogies, and I can't recommend them. I would be willing to try these again if I find out that the batch I had was just a one-off freak accident of separation. So let me know in the comments below if you have this set and if you had similar problems. I have never had this much trouble with any single art supply before, and this is actually probably the first art supply that I am directly not going to recommend. Usually it's kind of like, there are instances in which this could be good, even things that I personally don't like, but I am pretty dissatisfied with the quality and how much separation there was, which I'm sure you noticed throughout this whole review. Again, let me know if you have tried koi watercolors. Did you have the same problems I did, or did I just get a bad batch? If you want to see more testing videos where I test out different variables for fluid painting, want to see any watercolor tutorials or some other art supply testing, subscribe to my channel. Or if you just want to see some of the art that I create, it's really varied. You can follow me either at Lacey Walker Art or at Rebel Unicorn Crafts on Instagram, or Rebel Unicorn Crafts on TikTok, where I make some funny videos as well as some tool talk videos. And I hope that you have a magically creative day.